It was a cold, rainy day in Town City, and Scorpio, Strangles, and the Wizard of Doom were in prison following their defeat by Scullo, Joe, and friends, after failing to secure Rufus the Runch treasure. They were discussing and plotting potential ways to get revenge on them. Many ideas had gone through the planning process, but none had emerged their master plan. Meanwhile, Scullo, Joe, Robo, Major Nick Thompson, and the bodyguard were hanging out in Scullo's living room, chattering away about anything and everything. A thought had been playing on Thompson's mind since the conclusion of their previous adventure. The others could see that something was bothering him, so they asked him what was wrong. "Is anything wrong?" asked Major Nick reassuringly. "You haven't been yourself recently." "You're worried about the Wizard of Doom's desire for revenge against me and Joe, aren't you?" questioned Scullo. "Don't be," added Joe. "We've outsmarted them many times before, and we'll do it again." Back at the prison, the Wizard of Doom became frustrated with the lack of concrete ideas. "You imbeciles," he retorted. "None of these will work." "Sorry," sighed Strangles. "Our plan was perfect. We had all of them trapped and at our mercy. But that dog of theirs, that robotic dog, Robo, sneaking around meddling in an unexpected attack brought our brilliant plan to ruin," Scorpio angrily responded. "What are you getting at?" inquired the Wizard of Doom. "Kill him," growled Strangles. "No, hold him hostage. That will bring them to us. Plus they won't have their hero to save them this time," argued Scorpio. I like it a lot." "Perfect," decided the Wizard of Doom. All agreed, and now they were ready to put their devious plan into practice. Returning to the six friends, they were enjoying their time together. Suddenly the room filled completely with smoke. After a while the smoke cleared, and everyone, coughing and spluttering, looked around, wondering where that smoke had originated from. During this, Scullo noticed that Robo had disappeared. "Anyone seen Robo?" he asked. "No," answered Joe. "He must have been scared and ran off because of the smoke." "Where did that smoke come from?" inquired Thompson. "That smoke was not normal," replied Major Nick. "There was something different about it. It could have only come from—" He was abruptly interrupted by the Wizard of Doom, who appeared to them in a portal, with Scorpio and Strangle standing beside him, and Robo locked in a cage behind them. Scullo tried to lunge at the portal, but was restrained by the bodyguard and Major Nick. Distraught, he cried out, "Give him back!" The Wizard of Doom smirked and taunted him. "Come get him." "Bring your friends also," Strangles added crudely. His friends could see how troubled their friend Scullo was, so agreed to submit to the enemy's demands, if that's what he wanted. Since his capture, Robo had been working on his escape plan. He noticed in the left-hand corner behind him, one of the steel wire bars was damaged and sticking out towards him. He chewed on this wire bar. Biting it off, he used it to unlock the cage door. Scullo and friends were about to agree when Robo suddenly exploded out the cage and charged the three, knocking them to the ground. Immediately the Wizard of Doom commanded, "Get him," and the portal closed. Everyone was bewildered and afraid after this, and Scullo dropped to his knees in despair. "What now?" asked Thompson. "We don't know where their castle is." The Wizard of Doom and associates had returned to their castle to conduct this devious plan, leaving Stans at the prison to avoid any suspicion. "There's nothing we can do," admitted Major Nick. "I'm afraid Robo will have to handle this on his own." Joe and the bodyguard went over to comfort Scullo, who was crying. "Hang in there," added the bodyguard, placing his hand on Scullo's shoulder. "Everything will be all right," Joe reassured, hugging him. "I know it will," sobbed Scullo. When they thought all hope was lost, a portal unexpectedly appeared, this time featuring Robo running over the castle's gate and over its drawbridge. "Look," exclaimed Joe to Scullo. "Robo did it," added Thompson. "He foiled their plan once again," joined the bodyguard. Unfortunately, this portal only lasted a short while, just enough time for Robo's friends to be reassured that he had escaped from the Wizard of Doom and company. The portal closed. No one said anything, except Major Nick, who commented, "We'll just have to hope Robo can find his way home." This is Robo's account of his journey. When I had finished dealing with my captives, I crossed the drawbridge and sniffed along the path that followed. After travelling for a bit, I heard a rustle in the bushes to my right, out of which appeared a squirrel. My focus was immediately directed to this, and I rushed for it, chasing the squirrel into the forest that surrounded Doom Castle. Pursuing it, I eventually lost it up a tree, where the squirrel and I had a small argument. An argument I won, as afterwards the squirrel vanished completely. However, this distraction caused me to completely lose my way. I wandered through the forest for a good while, looking for a way out. until I spotted a shadow crouching in the distance. I approached this figure carefully and discovered it was an old, scruffy man with long unkempt hair and beard and wearing a checked woolen shirt with overalls, rubber boots, overcoat, scarf and flat cap, all old and stained. The man was sitting under a tree smoking his pipe when he saw me approaching. He said something to me that I couldn't fully understand, but it sounded like he wanted to help. So I crouched flat on the ground, wagged my tail slowly and looked up at him sadly in response, hoping he'd recognise my predicament. The man smiled at me and motioned to me to follow him. I immediately stood up and panted and wagged my tail in excitement and agreement, happy to know we understood each other, and followed the old man to his house. We arrived at the old man's small rustic log cabin, located in a small clearing next to a stream. I sprinted in ahead of him and made myself at home on his couch, curling up and falling asleep. I was later awakened by a sweet smell which filled the whole house, and saw the old man carrying 2 plates of food that he placed on the dining table. I ate from the plate he directed me to. It was rabbit stew. When we had finished our dinner, the old man went and sat in his special armchair, and I joined him. Sitting on his lap, he investigated my collar and introduced himself. Unfortunately, I couldn't interpret what his name was. He stroked me gently until he and I fell asleep. The next morning, after we had some breakfast, that delicious rabbit stew again, the old man and I started out on our journey to get me home, or at least out of this forest. This journey took a couple of days, during which the old man showed me many amazing sights, too many to discuss here. We also ate lots of his wonderful rabbit stew as well. We eventually emerged out onto a highway that separated the forest in two. The old man knelt in front of me with tears in his eyes and explained that our time together had ended. I licked his face, showing my gratitude for all he had done, and he patted me on the head. Then we both went our separate ways. I travelled down this highway, hoping to find a way home. The highway was very desolate, with the wind and an odd bird call being the only sounds I could hear, and trees that stretched to the horizon being the only things I could see. I had been walking for quite a spell when I unexpectedly heard a noise behind me. I looked and saw a vehicle advancing down the road. I halted and waited until it arrived. When it was close, I sat down and started howling. The plan must have worked, as they stopped, and the vehicle was a heavy-duty truck, out of which appeared a large man with unusual long hair and moustache. He wore a checked woolen shirt, like the old man, jeans, leather work boots, and a trucker cap, all oil-stained. The large man called to someone in the truck, saying something I couldn't interpret, but what they said led him to bend down and attempt to pick me up, which I accepted instantly, showing my gratitude by licking his face all over. He laughed and carried me to his truck, and his partner wanted to hold me on his lap, a position I was okay with, as any friend of his was a friend of mine. I hung my head and stuck my tongue out the window, and felt the cool breeze whistling against my steel as we travelled to our destination, which I hoped was home. We arrived. It was not home, but a small town located on the west outskirts of Town City named Elphin, at around midday, 4 days after leaving Doom Castle. We pulled up at the town's truck stop, and the 2 men exited the vehicle. They commanded me to stay, which I did. I waited there for some time until they returned with food for us all, yes, including me. They brought 2 buckets of fried chicken for them, and a much smaller one for me. Not a food I was acquainted with before, but one I'd definitely add to the menu in future. After lunch, the large man made me a leash out of an old piece of rope, and while he attached it to my collar, checked my tag. Afterwards, he took me to an unknown location. Reaching our destination, we entered and went up to the counter, and he talked with the receptionist. While he talked with her, I sat on the floor beside him and studied my surroundings. The walls were coffee brown, the doors and wall and window trims were chocolate brown. The reception desk was made of stone on its sides and marble on the top, none giving me a clue to my whereabouts. The only hint was the large amount of animal paraphernalia around. I wondered if this was some kind of animal theme park, which excited me, but I couldn't be sure. After my friend finished his conversation, he bent down and told me something I thought was good at first, but after I felt someone take hold of my leash and saw my friend leave the establishment, I knew I was mistaken. This stranger dragged me through a large door and down a long, dark hallway past many other sad-looking dogs, cats and other animals, all locked in cages. Filled with fear, I immediately started nibbling at my lead to escape, as I knew what was to come. When we arrived at my new home, the lead snapped and I fled the scene as fast as possible. I raced up the hallway, through the door, through the front door, and around the surrounding streets, losing my pursuers. At the time I didn't realise, but later was told these people would have helped me home, so I guess I owe them an apology. After perusing the streets for a bit, I spotted the town's train station. Seeing this as another potential way home, I hurried as fast as I could and through a sea of legs entered a train that had just pulled up and hid under one of the seats and fell asleep. During the train's journey to wherever its destination, the conductor entered my carriage and began to check each passenger's tickets. When he arrived at the seat I was asleep under, he investigated a noise I must have made in my sleep, a noise I can't remember, and spotted me. He also must have consulted with the passengers seated there, inquiring if they were my owner. After they obviously denied, he snatched me and barked something foreign to me, all which snapped me awake. In surprise and terror I bit him and raced down the carriage with the conductor following close behind. He pursued me through each car one by one, accompanied by some of the other passengers. I'd reached the final car and my rivals were fast approaching. I noticed that this carriage had just travelled onto a bridge, towering over the raging river that lay beneath, as my foes began to surround me and enclosed all my exits. Except the one, I knew what I must do. Nervous, and when the time was right, I closed my eyes and jumped. I landed safely in the river, but my troubles were not over. I was violently dragged down the river, fighting to stay above the water. I didn't know at the time, but this river ended with a waterfall that I was steadily approaching. Through my struggling, I observed a small but strong-looking log stuck between some rocks. I managed to pull myself towards it and grasped with my teeth a twig attached to it. My additional weight swung the log, and it locked between two of the rocks. To my terror, the force of the log slam against the rocks, plus the pressure of my bite, caused the twig to snap off, and I continued my descent as before. I immediately noticed that the river was beginning to disappear. However, it was misty, and I couldn't see why. Maybe we were approaching land. As I proceeded, I realized there was no land coming to me, thinking the river ending meant I was safe. But no, it was worse. I was approaching a waterfall. Scrambling to save myself, I paddled as hard as I could, but couldn't stop myself from going over into the depths below. I eventually came to and started to open my eyes, and all I could see were long, straight vertical bars. I continued to regain consciousness and could see my surroundings more clearly. I was in a small, dark, concrete room, resembling many old bunkers I'd seen on TV, and lit only by a couple of oil lanterns, which concerned me. What was I doing here, and how did I end up here? Then I realized my current circumstances. I was locked in a cage like before. This again, I thought confidently. Let's get it over with. I attempted to escape by charging the cage door. However, I hadn't fully recovered my strength and ultimately collapsed. After regaining consciousness for a second time, I heard muffled speech, and slowly opening my eyes, could see only a bright light and two blurry figures standing over me. I tried to move but couldn't move a bolt. Avoiding the light, I directed my focus to my arms and saw that they were restrained to the table I was lying on, with rusty old crescent-shaped pipe clamps, and as soon my legs were in the same predicament. I couldn't determine the identities of the two figures, as their faces were covered with balaclavas. However, I knew their intentions were not good, since they were holding tools, one a screwdriver and the other a drill. About to begin their abhorrent and unhygienic surgery, suddenly a loud noise filled the room, and lifting my head, saw a small group carrying firearms storm in, and saw two of them point their guns at my captives. My captives immediately dropped their tools and raised their hands, putting them behind their head, and knelt on the ground. Then the rest of the group returned, including their leader, with the rest of the gang, including what I believe was their leader, entered and positioned themselves the same as the previous two, all being handcuffed in the process. One member of my rescuers approached me. There I could distinguish they were military. He left and spoke to who I guess was his commander. After nodding his head, the soldier came back and set me free. Carrying me, he followed the commander out of the bunker, and the other soldiers leading the gang trailed close behind. I only discovered later who my captors were. They were the Ronner sisters, a gang consisting of 6 factions, each led by one of the 6 sisters, with the eldest Erica known as Optic Slate, and her syndicate being the largest and most secretive of them all. The gang had been active for over a decade, starting out as a small operation consisting of Erica and her friends committing petty crimes around the south side of Town City. Later, the other 5 sisters joined, causing their crimes to increase and their status to rise as one, if not the, most powerful gangs in the area. All this success resulted in the eldest, Erica Optic Slate Runner, to become one of the region's state's most wanted and most dangerous criminals. More recently, they had become known for stealing and selling military-grade technology and weapons, and other such government secrets. The Ronner sisters also had been accused of selling these to foreign governments and other wealthy elite, leading to the military and the Secret Service to track their every movement, keeping watch over them night and day. The faction and leader captured during my rescue was the one led by Ilva Cybertot Ronner, the youngest of the Ronner sisters, who and the rest of her squad had been located making camp in an old abandoned military bunker about a day's journey from the military base Fort Stoke, situated in a clearing in the Greenwood Forest, a large forest located along the southeast side of Town City. This fort was commanded to investigate this location and arrest any members found so they could be brought back for face trial. Arriving back at home base after about a day of travelling, the soldier who rescued and took care of me during the journey back brought me to one of the veterinarians stationed there. She examined me, checked my collar for my identity, and after giving the OK, called that soldier to return, who brought a bowl of food and set a place for me to sleep in her office. As I was eating, I could hear the veterinarian, the soldier, and the commander talking. I wasn't sure what they were saying, but I knew it was something about me. Following my supper, I went and lay down and went to sleep. I was awakened by my soldier friend, who greeted me with a bright smile and spoke to me, gently patting my back. I couldn't understand what he said, yet his cheerful demeanour gave me hope that the news was good. Maybe I was finally going home. He wrapped the blanket I was sleeping on around me and brought me to his jeep. He placed me on the seat to his right, and 2 other soldiers joined us, positioning themselves in the back, and my friend settled in the pilot's seat. After receiving the preceding salute from the fort's commander, we exited out of Fort Stoke using its front gate and travelled along the road that followed. My friend's excitement convinced me that I was finally going home. I wanted Scullo and the rest to see me after all these weeks. I had been gone, so they knew I was safe and sound. However, I couldn't be sure, since I had experienced so many false alarms already. It had almost been a month since Robo's disappearance, and Joe, Major Nick Thompson and the bodyguard were all very concerned, not just for Robo's safety but more so for Scullo, who had understandably become extremely distraught and troubled by the whole ordeal. Although the past month had caused everyone immense distress, some good did occur. After the portal where they saw Robo fleeing over the drawbridge of Doom Castle, Major Nick called their police friend Sergeant Bobby, reporting to him that 3 prisoners might have escaped. Sergeant Bobby returned to Nick saying, 3 prisoners, the Wizard of Doom, Scorpio and Strangles, that you informed us about, are securely locked up in their cell. If they did escape when Robo attacked them, during his escape he must have knocked something somewhere that teleported them back. If you have any more concerns, do not hesitate to call back. This is Sergeant Bobby signing out. Joe also received a call from the Elfin Animal Shelter. However, that didn't lead to anything significant, as Robo's stay ended abruptly. But at the time, it gave everyone hope that Robo had arrived somewhere safe. Everything was quiet on Playwell Ave, and all were going about their usual business. Joe, Major Nick Thompson, the bodyguard, were comforting Scullo at his house and thinking about ways to find Robo. No one knew what to do. Then Major Nick took Joe aside and told Joe, I think it's time. It's been a month, and the only lead we've had is that call you received from Elfin. Since then, nothing. Not yet, disagreed Joe. Give him a few more days. You yourself said that Robo could take care of himself. He'll come, just wait. Major Nick sighed. I know you want to help Scullo, but you got that call nearly 2 weeks ago, and it doesn't take this long to get from Elfin to here. Even if he ran into trouble, let's face facts. Robo's not coming back. Joe thought, and after a bit realised Nick was right. With teary eyes and his head hung low, turned, approached Scullo and laid his hand on his shoulder. As Joe was about to speak, immediately they heard an unusual noise. The bodyguard looked out the window and saw a military jeep pull up outside the house. What is it? Inquired Thompson. A military jeep just parked up and they're coming to the door. and one is carrying something wrapped in a blanket, the bodyguard murmured. As soon as the bodyguard said this, there was a knock at the front door. Major Nick and Joe went to answer it, and were astonished to see Robo, alive and well. Robo instantly leaped out of the soldier's arms and rushed in, barking like mad. Skello heard this and looked up and saw Robo rushing towards him. Skello dropped out of his chair to his knees and with his arms outstretched caught Robo. They hugged each other tightly and everyone else gathered round, all smiling and with tears in their eyes. "You're home," Skello wept. "Yes," Robo thought, "I'm finally home."